I never thought a simple family dinner could unravel everything I believed about my marriage. It started like any other Sunday evening. Meline had insisted we go to her parents' house, saying it had been too long since we last visited. Her mother, Gloria, always carried an air of quiet superiority, the kind that made you feel like you were never quite enough in her presence. I'd learned to tolerate her coldness over the years, swallowing my pride for Meline's sake. But that night, something broke. It was during dessert when the tension finally exploded. I don't even remember what I said, something harmless, probably about work or the weather. Gloria gave me one of her icy glances and then, without warning, slapped me across the face. The sound echoed through the dining room. My cheek burned instantly, but more than the physical sting, it was the humiliation that cut deeper. Everyone froze. Meline stared at me, eyes wide, and then she did the one thing I never expected. She told me to apologize to her mother. That moment shattered me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something I'd been ignoring for far too long. She had never truly respected me. She had always chosen her mother over me. Every time, without hesitation. That slap wasn't just from Gloria. It was symbolic of how Meline had treated me all along. I felt alone in a room full of people, completely invisible, as if my dignity meant nothing to the woman I had pledged my life to. I didn't stay for the rest of the meal. I stood up, pushed my chair in, and left without another word. I didn't yell, didn't cry, I just walked out. Driving home, I replayed the scene over and over, not with sadness, but with anger. Not at Gloria, but at myself. How had I let this happen? How had I allowed someone else's contempt to shape my self-worth? The next morning, I called my friend Carter. He had always been good at digging into things, the kind of guy who knew people and how to find secrets buried deep. I asked him to look into Gloria, her finances, her background, anything he could find. I needed leverage, something to ensure I would never again be at the mercy of someone who saw me as disposable. Weeks passed, and Carter came back with information that shocked even me. Gloria had been having an affair for years, right under Richard's nose. Worse, she had been siphoning money from his accounts, hiding it in offshore investments. I couldn't believe it. The woman who acted like a moral pillar in her daughter's life was nothing more than a liar and a thief. I confronted her and Richard together. I laid everything out, texts, bank statements, photos. Gloria turned pale, her mask slipping for the first time. Richard sat there in silence, stunned, before finally standing up and walking out of the room. A few days later, he filed for divorce. Meline was caught in the fallout. She tried calling me, begging me to talk, but I didn't answer. When I finally did pick up, she asked me why I did it. I told her the truth. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I finally understood that I deserved better than to be stepped on by her and her mother. She cried, said she loved me, but it was too late. I could hear the confusion in her voice, the betrayal, but where had her empathy been for me? We finalized the divorce quickly. There was no fight, no courtroom drama. Meline signed the papers and moved out, taking most of what she wanted. I kept the dog, the only living thing in that house who had ever been loyal to me. Letting go felt strange at first, but then it became freeing. I sold the house we had bought together, packed what little I needed, and moved into a small apartment downtown. For the first time in years, I breathed easier. I started going to the gym again, reading books I had once abandoned, rediscovering parts of myself I had buried under years of trying to please others. I met new people, made new friends, and slowly rebuilt my life around my own happiness. Then I met Sienna. We crossed paths at a gallery opening. She was an artist, bold and unapologetically herself. We talked for hours, laughing, sharing stories. She didn't know my past, didn't care about my failures. To her, I was just a man starting over, and that was enough. One night, after we had gotten closer, she asked me if I missed my old life. I thought about it, really thought about it. I thought about the dinners, the silences, the way I used to shrink myself to avoid conflict. And I realized I didn't miss any of it. I missed the idea of what I thought love should be, but not the reality. I ran into Meline once after everything ended. We exchanged polite words, nothing more. She looked tired, older somehow, and I wondered if she regretted the choices she made. But I didn't hate her. I didn't even feel angry anymore. What I felt was peace. Walking away from that conversation, I smiled, not out of spite, but because I knew I had done the hardest thing anyone can do. I chose myself. And in doing so, I found a version of me I had almost forgotten existed. I never thought I could feel so light. After that encounter with Meline, something inside me settled. Not because I suddenly had all the answers, but because I no longer needed them. The past was the past. Painful, yes, but it no longer defined me. I had spent years trying to be what others wanted me to be. A good husband, a respectful son-in-law, a man who knew his place in someone else's family. But now, for the first time, I was simply living for myself. Sienna and I grew closer over the next few months. She wasn't just beautiful or charming. She challenged me. She asked questions I didn't know how to answer, made me think about life differently, and most importantly, she saw me. Not as a victim of my marriage, not as Gloria's punching bag, not even as the man I used to be, but as someone new, someone still becoming.
And that was okay.
We didn't rush into anything serious. We took our time, learning about each other, building trust slowly. There were moments when I caught myself hesitating, afraid I might lose her like I lost everything else. But Sienna was different. She didn't demand loyalty. She inspired it. She gave space where I needed it and filled the silence with warmth when I was ready to speak. One evening, while we sat on her balcony watching the city lights flicker like stars trapped on Earth, she turned to me and said, "You're not the same person you were when we met." I looked at her, curious. "Is that a bad thing?" She smiled softly.
No.
"It's a brave thing." That night, I realized how far I had come. I used to measure my worth by how much I could endure, how many slaps I could take without flinching, how many apologies I could give for things I didn't do wrong. But now I measured my strength by how much I had let go, by how many times I chose peace over pride, honesty over habit, and self-respect over survival. I started therapy around that time. I resisted at first. I had always believed men dealt with pain quietly, behind closed doors. But sitting across from Dr. Alvarez, hearing her say, "You don't have to carry this alone," broke something open in me. For weeks, I cried more than I spoke. But slowly, I began to unpack the layers, the childhood lessons about being strong, the fear of disappointing people, the belief that love meant sacrifice, even when it hurt. It wasn't easy work. Healing rarely is. But I showed up. Every week, rain or shine, I showed up. And eventually, the pain stopped feeling like a permanent part of me. It became something I carried with intention, not accident. Something I could look at, understand, and release when I was ready. Meanwhile, my career began to shift in ways I hadn't anticipated. I had been stuck in the same job for years, coasting through meetings and emails, pretending I was content. But after leaving Meline, I felt a fire reignite, a hunger to build something meaningful. I enrolled in an online course for digital marketing, something I had always been curious about but never pursued. Within 6 months, I landed a new role at a startup, surrounded by people who actually cared about ideas, collaboration, growth. I wasn't rich, and I wasn't famous. But I was proud of the work I did, of the way I treated people, of the boundaries I now held firmly. I had learned how to say no, not out of anger, but out of clarity. There were still days when loneliness crept in. Nights when the silence of my apartment reminded me of the years I had spent sharing a bed with someone who never truly saw me. But instead of reaching for distractions, I leaned into those moments. I wrote in a journal, meditated, listened to music that made me feel something real. I allowed myself to grieve without guilt. And then there were the mornings when I woke up with nothing but gratitude. When I would walk the dog along the river trail, coffee in hand, sunlight hitting the water just right, and I'd smile, without knowing why. Those were the best days. Because they reminded me that happiness doesn't always come from big moments. Sometimes, it's just the quiet joy of waking up and liking the person you've become. Meline and I never got back in touch after that final conversation. Occasionally, I'd hear from mutual friends that she had moved away, started seeing someone new, tried therapy too. I hoped she found peace. I really did. But I also understood now that her healing wasn't my responsibility, just like mine had never been hers. I had once believed that marriage was supposed to last forever, that if it ended, it meant I had failed. But now I saw it differently. I had succeeded in walking away from something that was killing me slowly. I had chosen dignity over decay, courage over comfort, and that took strength far greater than staying ever could. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I celebrated alone. I bought myself a nice dinner, toasted to no one in particular, and laughed at how absurd life could be. How sometimes the worst moments carve out the space for the best ones to grow. And when Sienna and I finally said I love you for the first time, not in a grand moment, just while making breakfast on a Saturday morning, I didn't flinch. I didn't question it. I just said it back like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because this time, love didn't feel like a trap. This time, love felt like freedom.